And speaking of tribal, that brings me to the tribal chief, Roman Reigns, who gave an interview to the website Complex.com, mostly about WWE stuff. But he was asked at the very end a couple of questions about AEW. And his comments really stirred up a lot of the AEW diehards. So all this tribalism, I mean, when you have an interview like this, I mean, this just sends them into fucking hyperdrive. All the WWE stands and all the AEW stands, they were coming at each other with their fucking spears and their pitchforks here. And they didn't really appreciate what Roman Reigns had to say. But this was how the writer framed the question to him, and then I'll read his response and I'll give my thoughts. Generally speaking, on the professional wrestling landscape right now, it is not really a direct comparison, but it seems like there is finally a viable competitor to WWE for the first time since the Monday Night Wars. That period gave us the NWO, Rock and Austin, and the list goes on. But that era sparked each company to up their game. Do you have that mindset at all currently? Is having AEW in the rear view that sort of extra motivation for you to perform that much better, or make sure those moments you make are that much more impactful for the fans? And this is what Roman Reigns had to say. Not for me personally. I'm one of those guys who will compete at anything. I want to be the best at anything that I choose to do. We pull up on lawnmowers, we cut the yard in half, I'm going to beat you. My side will look better than yours. So to me, I don't see the real competition because I think their fan base legitimately is a hardcore fan base. So there's like a ceiling and a built-in ground to that viewership. WWE is trying to connect with everyone. We're trying to connect with the mainstream. We're trying to pull in the casual fan. We're trying to engage the new viewer while also servicing our hardcore fan base and give them compelling stories to fulfill them as well. I've said it before, when the audience is probably the biggest character in your show, that is strange to me. You'll hear it all the time, the reviews and the comparisons, I think because they are the new kids on the block. They're the cool kids in town, I guess, because of how premature and how novel it kind of still is. I think they are still being babied by these hardcore wrestling fans, which is fine. That's great. I don't think anybody's going to ever, especially from a performance standpoint, say, oh no, there's more opportunities than ever before. That sucks. So it's not a bad thing. It's a great thing for pro wrestling. It's just a weird argument because there's so much bias and there's so much I'm on this side and I'm not going to open my mind to the other side, and it goes both ways. As far as competition, not to me. There might be some other people on our roster who maybe think they need to dig deep and get better as a performer and what they do out there at the art form, but there's nobody in the whole world, any other promotion or in WWE, I'm better at this than everybody else. And I stand on that. That's the totality of it. I'm not just talking about, oh, his spots are so good and he counters well. That stuff don't mean anything to me. When you tally it all up, nobody touches me in this business. So there's a lot to unwrap here. He makes a lot of valid points. I have talked about there being a honeymoon period for AEW. You've heard me use that word before, especially with all the recent talent acquisitions. At some point, the new car smell wears off, and they have to be able to stand on their own 2 feet and keep the stories and keep the matches fresh and keep them interesting enough to keep people excited about the product. AEW generally does a better job than WWE does at not feeding us a constant stream, for example, of rematches. Not that we don't get rematches in AEW. We do. I mean, we're getting Cody and Malachi Black Part 3 next weekend. But it's not the weekly in and out rematch after rematch. Like every week you tune in on Monday night and you expect to see the same fucking matches over and over and over again. They weren't that great the first time, let alone the third, fourth, and fifth time. AEW is actively trying to elevate the names of a lot of their younger talent by putting them on TV. Guys like Daniel Garcia and Dante Martin and Wheeler Yuta. Guys who fans may look at and go, who? Who are these guys? I don't know who these people are. Well, the only way to educate people about who they are is to feature them on TV, and I think AEW does a very good job of mixing more established names with less established ones. I do think people give AEW the benefit of the doubt on stuff more often than WWE. I think that's a fact. I used to do that with NXT. I used to do that with Lucha Underground. Because I wasn't burned by them the way that I've been burned by the booking in WWE. They earned that goodwill from me. They rarely let me down. So even when they would do something that on the surface, it really didn't make a lot of sense. Like, why are they doing this? Like, this doesn't really make sense. Or if Lucha Underground had a segment or a match or something that I didn't like, I knew that in the end, it would make sense. Or if it was something I didn't like, the next time they would do better. WWE squandered that goodwill with me a long time ago. I hold them to a higher standard because they've been doing this longer than anybody else. And they should know better. And yet they still feed me shit every week and tell me it's filet mignon. This is a company that has been doing this for decades. This is a company, they talk about, we got our finger on the pulse. You got your finger up your ass. So I don't cry for WWE. The criticism they get is well earned. And when there's reason for praise, I give them praise. Is AEW being babied, as he says, by the hardcore fans? Yeah, I think there is some of that going on. But I also think that AEW largely puts out a more consistently entertaining wrestling show. Tony Khan has done a better job of that than Vince McMahon has. Part of it is that Tony Khan is a fan. You know, for Vince McMahon, I think it's just purely business. I'm sure he has fun doing what he does. He's so used to doing it. He's a lot older. He's set in his ways. But if you were to ask me which company has given the fans more of what they really want to see, the answer is AEW. And so long as they continue to do that, then they'll build on that brand loyalty. I know all the WWE drones, they're not going to be able to comprehend anything I just said here. How could you say that they're giving the fans what they want when Rampage ratings have gone down each week, and even the worst episode of Monday Night Raw beats Dynamite every week by at least 5 or 6 or 700,000 viewers? Rome wasn't built in a day, or a week, or a month. WWE has its core audience of fans, which is eroding a little bit more each and every year. But they have their core audience of fans that will always watch no matter what. That base is bigger than AEW's base. But the growth that AEW has experienced in 2 years, WWE's been around a lot longer than 2 years. The growth they've had in 2 years is very impressive. Now, if we come back here 2 years from now, and the numbers for AEW look exactly the same, then we know they're not growing their base. And that's a problem. Reigns talking about the product only appealing to hardcores and that their viewership has a ceiling, that I disagree with. They do cater to the hardcores, that is absolutely true. But they also have stars on that roster, and not just the ex-WWE names, that can appeal to a more mainstream audience. Without a doubt. They absolutely have characters that can appeal to kids, for example, and not just adults. Darby Allin, Orange Cassidy, those are two names that immediately spring to mind. So I disagree that they have a ceiling, and they can only appeal to one kind of audience. They have chosen to cater to one kind of audience. Do I think AEW can have appeal beyond just the hardcores? Absolutely. Now, Reigns calling himself the best in the world is something that I would expect him to say, and I don't have a problem with that. Why would he say anything different? He is one of the best in the world. Right now, at this moment, Roman Reigns is one of the very best in the world, in any company, anywhere in the world. I'm not going to sit here and say he is the best, because that is subjective. But is he one of the best? Without a doubt. Now, he's never been tested outside of the WWE machine, but I think if you took that Roman Reigns that we see today and you dropped him, right? He didn't have the WWE machine behind him. He didn't have Vince McMahon coddling him. If you took this tribal chief version of Roman Reigns, with or without Paul Heyman, and you dropped him in AEW, or you dropped him in Impact, or almost anywhere else, he would instantly on day one be one of the top 2 or maybe 3 biggest names in the entire company. He's got the look. His promos have gotten much better. His work in the ring is very good. Yeah, he wrestles a very different style than somebody like a Kenny Omega or a Will Ospreay or any of the other, big names that you might think of in terms of like big marquee matches. It's a different style, but his matches, he's had some excellent matches. Over the last 13 months that he has been champion, he has had some excellent matches. You can't discount his work. He's believable in the role. He has a certain authenticity to him. When he walks out there, it feels like a star is walking to the ring. And that wasn't the case when he was miscast as a babyface and he was reciting all that horrible dialogue and they had him totally miscast on that show. I don't blame him for that. That was a misfire by Vince McMahon, who was doing everything in his power, regardless of how the fans were reacting, to shove him further and further and further down people's throats until they were gagging on him. Had they turned him heel years earlier, all of that could have been avoided. But now we're finally getting the Roman Reigns that we should have gotten 5 years ago. But I look at him, and again, it's the complete package of what you would look for, I think, in a pro wrestler. That's what we have gotten over these last 13 months. Finally, he found himself. Finally, they got it right. And he's right. It's not just about moves and holds and counters. It's not. And I have no issue with him saying or thinking that he's the best. And anybody who gets upset about that is working themselves into a shoot. I had to get that in there. You didn't think we were going to pass the 10-year anniversary of that Hogan tweet without me giving it a mention. I mean, come on. But that's what these people are doing. They're working themselves into a shoot. They're getting all worked up over nothing. There was nothing he said on that part that is untrue. Now, the writer also asked him about CM Punk. He said, I wanted to ask you about someone specifically on that side of things, CM Punk. He is gone by the best in the world. You arguably are that right now in wrestling. I know you guys worked together in some capacity years ago, but is there a part of you that wishes you could go toe-to-toe the way things are set up now and have a big match with him or something like that? And Roman responds, so I answered a question similar to this a while ago, and it falls back to what our audience wants to see. If our audience wanted to see it and they were clamoring for it, couldn't shut up about it, and all the stars aligned as a businessman and as a performer who was trying to seek out the best for our audience, I wouldn't say no. But I mean, on a personal level, it doesn't do anything for me. That's not going to elevate me at all. He's older now. I haven't really seen a full match. I've seen a clip or two, and to me, a step or two has been lost. Which, if you've seen any of Punk's recent matches, I think he's pretty well worked off that ring rust. He's looked very good in the ring. But he says, then also he got his ass whooped in the UFC. I don't think anybody really believes someone 200 pounds soaking wet with no explosive bone in their body could ever really do anything to me. I'm 6'3", 265 pounds, a legitimate athlete who can throw some weight around and has been on the gridiron at the highest level, D1, all ACC. I probably would have maintained in the NFL if my health issues didn't happen when I was 22 years old. So, I mean, when it comes down to it, I'll throw him and pretty much the rest of that roster out the club, no problem. They're just little brothers, you know? First of all, I don't believe for a second that he has only seen a clip or two. I think he's watched more than he lets on. But again, I have no issue with the shit talk. I love the shit talk. The top star from one company talking smack about one of the top stars in the other company. You could take that same comment about Punk being 200 pounds soaking wet without an explosive bone in his body, and you could apply that to Finn Balor, who Reigns just worked 2 matches with. And I don't think he has any, ill will or disrespect for Finn Balor. He's just talking shit. I hardly take that as a dig at just the AEW roster, because it's not as if they don't have people like that on the WWE roster. They may have more of them on the AEW roster, but believe me, you got a lot of people who are 5'8", 5'9", 5'10", 200 pounds soaking wet on both rosters. The man knows what he's doing. He's getting people stirred up. That little brothers line was fantastic. I thought that was great. Oh, the anger I saw online from that comment. He has got these people by the balls. And they know it. And the AEW fans are just tripping over themselves. Falling right in line just like he wanted. Falling like dominoes. He even got Junior Dos Santos to respond. He tweeted earlier, he says, "Hey Roman Reigns, I heard your interview. Please send the address of this club that you will throw me and my little brothers out of." The man has had one pro wrestling match so far, and he wants to talk that shit. At least we know he could back it up, right, given his background. I don't doubt for a second that he could take Roman Reigns in a fight. If you really wanted to get down to brass tacks, he can back it up. I just love that of all the people on the AEW roster to respond directly to Roman Reigns, it was the one who literally just worked his first AEW match, or match of any kind, the other night. And not for nothing, he didn't look half bad. I said this in the review. For someone who has never done this before, I think this kid's got a future. 37 years old, first getting into the business, but I think this kid just might have a future.